that's what the government is saying, that they've actually gone out, they've looked at all of the issues that the Irish people said caused them to vote no on the last occasion. They researched them, they went into the EU, they got this protocol, and it will now be enshrined in law in about 3 years' time. What the no side are saying is that it doesn't make any difference. The treaty is exactly the same, which is perfectly true. But the government are saying that they never went out to renegotiate the treaty.
Yes, that's right.
They went out to establish clarifications of issues that the no side had said might become live. Interestingly enough, Terry Prone has a piece in the Sunday Tribune where she says that if the yes side is planning to win in this current round, then really what they need to do is they need to stop saying things like they did the last time, that this is a very interesting treaty, but really I haven't read it, it's very difficult to understand, and it will be good for Europe and everybody should sign up to it. And they should keep it very simple and argue that if it is good for Europe and it is good for us, then stay on message.
Yes.
Don't get deflected. It's interesting, just one other thing on the Lisbon Treaty. 2 new groups seem to have sprung up in today's papers, which I was unaware of until now. One is called We Belong, and one is called Ireland for Europe. Ireland for Europe apparently is meeting today, and Pat Cox is going to launch it. And it's a group of people, including Oliver Tatton, Brendan Halligan, and Olivia Buckley, the former Fianna Fáil press director, who are all encouraging the 25 to 39-year-olds to vote yes. Curiously enough, Olivia Buckley also turns up in this group called We Belong.
Is that a pro-treaty one as well?
That's a pro-treaty one as well, yeah. And that one is also seeking for people to vote yes. And there's a final group that actually looks members of Generation Yes, which apparently is taking the Barack Obama approach and doing sort of Facebook and Twitter and blogs, and they are actually swinging in behind the Pat Cox new group as well. So it looks as though the yes side have actually got started very quickly this time, and maybe have learned some of the lessons from the last treaty.
And interesting as well, there's another group too called Women for Europe, who I don't know if they've formally launched, but they are also now have established themselves as well. I met some of their members last week. But remember last time round, during the campaigning days, we didn't have those kind of civil groups, if you like, which were very much there for the Nice Treaty, and I think that was one of the reasons also why there was why the vote went against the political sides, because they didn't have those more civil groups. Now they actually, it seems they're springing up all over the place, which will help a yes vote.
Those civil groups which were women and business and wider community, if you like. But what we also lacked, I think, was what we had last time and don't have this time was a focus for the no vote. Declan Ganley was new. Yes. Nobody had come across him before.
Yes.
There was the whole growth of Libertas. Would it actually become a movement throughout Europe? And there was a different political economy. There was a different economic environment last time. I think it'll be very different this time. It will be much harder this time, I think, for the no vote to get the same focus that they got through Declan Ganley the last time.
Stephen Knowlton, Professor of Journalism at ECU, just getting onto the Sunday Times article, it is referring to a number of people who were quite active in the no side the last time round, who now, according to the Sunday Times, are going to switch. And they're talking about Finian McGrath, who's an independent deputy, and Ronan Mullen, an independent senator. According to the Sunday Times, they're among those poised to switch from the no camp. And they also say that several non-political figures who opposed the first referendum are also changing sides or reconsidering last year's vote. They include Ben Dunn, whom they describe as a businessman. Well, of course he is. And they say he was one of the most high-profile opponents of the treaty last time. Now, according to the Sunday Times, he says he will be voting yes, although he continues to have reservations. So interesting. What is your own view about the whole thing?
I mean, nothing is different. I mean, the protocol is a promise of a protocol sometime in the future. We don't have a protocol. We have an agreement that the treaty is utterly unchanged from the last time.
Yes, but we're being given guarantees.
We are.
On certain issues which were considered to be the main reasons why people voted no.
They can't give legally binding guarantees because those are things that the courts do, not political figures do. So we've got a legally binding guarantee given by people who cannot give legally binding guarantees, and they promise they'll do a protocol someday in the future. Nothing is different, and if you read the first 5 lines, if you can get through them, of the new declaration, it says this has nothing to do with changing. The treaty is exactly as it was.
No, because the other countries have ratified, or the majority of them have ratified the treaty.
And that's fine. It probably is, one, going to pass, and two, probably is a good idea, even though it does involve a certain loss of sovereignty. It does involve a militarization. It probably does. I mean, there are a number. The problems with it from the last time are very much still around because nothing has changed. I suspect it will probably pass this time. And this list of people who were against it the last time, who think they might be for it this time, essentially, Finian McGraw is most straightforward about it, saying my gut instinct was no last time and my gut instinct is yes this time. And that's about what we're going on, because it is an absolutely impenetrable document. And if you've tried to read it, every other line refers you to a section of an earlier version of the document, which refers you to there's no wonder. It should not be a political embarrassment to admit that you haven't read the whole thing, because it is impenetrable, and one has to assume deliberately so. But at the end of the day, I think it'll pass because we need the money.
Why do you say it wasn't deliberately obscure? That's just, unfortunately, the way these very dense EU treaties tend to be composed. And the reality is that before, its predecessor was an EU constitution, which was a much cleaner document, much easier to read and much easier to understand. But of course, because the French and the Dutch rejected that, and the British were horrified at the notion that it was being called a constitution, it got changed. And as a result of that, it became this very much more complicated piece of legalese from Brussels. That's the problem.
Of course. And when documents or when concepts go from being relatively comprehensible and clear to being utterly impenetrable and obscure, we have to assume someone intended that to happen. Documents do not obscure themselves without human intervention. Somebody wanted it this way.
But why would they want to make a document so impossible to read or understand?
So people will not oppose it.
But you see, the majority of people in the EU didn't vote in it. That's
correct.
the thing. I mean, we were the only ones, actually. We're the only ones who...
Yes.
Spain did vote in it by way of referendum as well. But the majority of countries have ratified this through their governments, their parliamentary process, not actually by handing it out. So the notion that, it was there's some sort of conspiracy theory and it was made to be very complicated because that would make people who were going to vote in it just get fed up with the whole thing and just vote yes. That doesn't necessarily stand up, considering the majority of the countries that ratified it did so through their parliaments.
Fair enough. But it is impenetrable. It cannot be read and digested and understood. And most of the peoples of Europe didn't get to vote on it. And probably one has to assume that if the political leadership thought it would pass, it would be put to a popular vote, because that's sort of giving it a stamp of democracy. Since that was unlikely to happen, those people didn't get to vote, and except for the quirk of the Irish thing,
it's very true. And this was very much point. Now, of course, the whole thing has changed. The economic climate has changed so much over the last 12 months. Konstantin Gurdjieff, you have not been in favour of the Lisbon Treaty in the past, have you?
Privately, I have not been in favour of it. Publicly, I have withdrawn from the debate on the issue due to different reasons, my positions at the time and things like that. I do think, I probably will abstain from debating about that issue in general once the campaign starts again this year.
Why will you do that?
There are several reasons, there are personal reasons really in that matter. But when a few things that are worth mentioning here is that you mentioned conspiracy theory. If it's a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy theory written by the Yes side itself, because as far as I remember, Mitterrand and Sarkozy are both amongst the other number of leaders themselves who wrote the treaty, who are responsible for writing the treaty, who have acknowledged the fact that they have, and even boasted about the fact that it was written on purpose as an impenetrable legalese document so that it doesn't go to the electorate, so it can be passed through the parliaments, because they were aware fully that their own electors would not approve that. So that's not a conspiracy theory created by no side. They're on the record saying that.